Welcome to episode 3 of the Cybersecurity webinar series. Hello, David again.
Hi.
With us today is Hubert Micallef, our very own information security expert and guest speaker from Go.
Thank you for inviting me to the podcast, Elaine, and hello, David, and hello to all the listeners out there who are joining us today. I can give a little background about myself to get us started. So, as you said, I'm an information security specialist with Go, and I make part of a small team, but a very dedicated information security team. I have been with the company for many years, so I've started way back in 2002. Overall, I have about 30 years of experience in IT, different facets of it, but I've been concentrating on information security for more than a decade now. Also, with regards to cybersecurity, I'm obviously biased. It's my job to be, but I really consider it very essential. So well done on creating this podcast. Cybersecurity is actually crucial for anyone that uses technology, even if they don't directly realize it. So it is important, for example, for my mother who keeps tabs on family living abroad on social media, to children who make use of remote learning or who play games with their friends online, for example, to small business owners who communicate with customers and suppliers via email, and obviously to the larger businesses who have digitalized most of their products and services and continuously interact with their customers via various online channels. So at Go, obviously provides all these services that I've just mentioned, and it enables these users to do what's most important to them. So we really think that cybersecurity is very important. It protects these users and their data, and we're obviously committed to provide a safer digital world for them to benefit.
So, Hubert, you have one of the most important roles today, actually, within Go in terms of security. Today, we shall be discussing penetration testing and the advantages and risks of having or not having penetration testing. Tell me, why do business need to have penetration testing?
Well, this is a rather vast topic, but I'll try to be concise. So as I've already mentioned, many companies, regardless of their size, these days they have shifted a large part of their business online, and they have an ever-increasing digital presence. So with this increased reliance on digital systems to conduct their business, they must consider penetration testing as a crucial step in keeping all these systems safe from cyber attacks. So what penetration testing is, basically, it's a security checkup of one's computer networks and software, and it involves engaging experts trying to break into your systems to find any weak spots before real hackers find them themselves. By doing these tests regularly, companies can find and fix these problems before they cause big issues, such as data breaches, for example, or financial losses, actually. So it's a way to make sure that the business stays secure and remains trusted by their customers in today's online world. So a number of points which demonstrate that pen testing is essential basically would be, first and foremost, always striving to do the right thing. So companies need to make sure that their systems that they make use of are as secure and as safe as possible for their business and their customers' benefit. Certain companies might also be certified in certain standards, like ISO 27001, for example. So they must periodically assess their security posture to retain these certifications. There's also the issue of regulation. So existing regulations like GDPR already expect companies to do this kind of testing so that the data that they have is well protected against breaches. Other upcoming regulations like NIS2 and DORA, for example, will require that many more companies will need to conduct this periodic testing. So many businesses basically will have new obligations under these new laws, And going forward, they will need to test to be sure that they're complying, so they basically can continue operating normally. I don't know if you've mentioned some of these laws that I've just alluded to. Taking NIS2, for example, it's an upcoming European regulation. It's designed to strengthen businesses against current and future cyber attacks. New main obligations for many companies will be risk management, corporate accountability, for example, with respect to security, enhanced reporting obligations, and also to provide business resiliency and continuity, for example.
So, from what I understand, penetration testing involves getting somebody from outside the company, a third party, to test for weaknesses in your system. So, David, now I turn to you. What are the benefits and drawbacks behind businesses investing in such practice?
Well, I like comparing this a lot to when you go to the doctor, and you get a checkup, or the dentist even. You could go to the dentist after your tooth starts hurting, but by then it's already hurt a lot. You might have an abscess, complication, so it's much better to do that annual, preferably more, that annual checkup where the dentist goes and tells you, listen, before this gets really bad, you've got a cavity, or we need to take out that tooth. Very personal experience because I need to take one out. So it's much better having that preemptive appointment with the dentist than post fact. And that is the exact benefit that you get from having regular pen tests on your company. You basically get a friendly attacker who points out, yeah, you have that cavity in your network, you have that vulnerability. Before, like Hubert rightly said, either you lose your license or regulation catches up with you, or even worse, you get a successful attack. But there are drawbacks. I think the main drawback is, going back to our analogy with the dentist, is the dentist can only tell you what state your mouth is in up to the point of the checkup. So if something happens right after a checkup, or in the week after a checkup, or something new happens, I don't know, you introduce a new food in your diet, whatever it is, the dentist won't be able to tell you that, something is going wrong. That's the drawback of a pen test. It's a spot check, so we do come across a number of customers that maybe feel too safe once they get a pen test and they solve all the issues highlighted. They have to keep in mind that IT especially is an extremely dynamic industry, new technologies. You throw up a new server, you take down a server, you change a line of code, and the pen test not becomes useless, but needs to be viewed in light of these changes and probably needs to be redone. So that's the drawback over there. It's not a continuous monitoring check over there.
Okay, so Hubert, what risks are we looking at, and what impacts on business operations could a company be facing if penetration testing is actually neglected? And where does a pen test fit into the overall security strategy of a business?
First of all, I'd like to follow up on what David was saying, and he's very right there, actually, that pen tests are a point-in-time assessment of a system in scope. Obviously, they're like complementary to continuous monitoring that one should also have in place for all their critical systems. So it's just like getting that assurance at that point in time that the pen test might provide for a particular system that one would want to assess. So for your question, Elaine, there's a very famous quote that I like to use that's very known with us in information security, but basically it's from Robert Mueller. He was a former director of the FBI, and basically he said, there are only two types of companies, so those that have been hacked and those that will be hacked. So it's not a matter of if, but when uh, something will happen. Uh, and this summarizes perfectly why continuous monitoring and pen testing basically are a must. So if one were to neglect penetration testing, um, you'd be exposing your business to various risks, including data breaches, as we mentioned, operational disruptions, legal consequences potentially. So without regular testing, vulnerabilities in systems will remain undetected. And there's an increased likelihood that cyber attacks will be successful. Uh, this can obviously result in compromised customer data, reputational damage, financial losses. Any single incident could potentially result in a company having to stop operating permanently, depending on the gravity of the situation, obviously. So it is crucial for companies to prioritize penetration testing as part of their general operations so that they can identify and mitigate all these security weaknesses that undoubtedly will be in systems. And they need to make sure that their businesses are resilient in today's digital landscape. I cannot stress this enough. So penetration testing is a must.
So cybersecurity is yet another challenge in terms of how we conduct our business. We are in technology as a business, but most businesses we come across are not really in the technology arena and may not understand what it means to have everything in line when it comes to regulation, risks facing them in relation to cybersecurity and other challenges. So really and truly, what are the common challenges businesses face in relation to penetration testing? And can we illustrate with some real-time examples that we have come across to illustrate actually the importance of addressing these challenges?
Well, if I may jump in here, I think first of all, to maybe state the obvious, I think one of the most difficult challenges businesses have is finding the right partner. Now, with with full cognizance that I am biased, you find partners like Go and you find partners like CyberSift that know what they're doing. But for every partner that knows what they're doing, you'll find 100 companies out there who simply run a scanner and plonk the results for you, maybe for a lot cheaper than what we do, but with no context, no vetting of the report for false positives. By false positives, and this is a plague in the industry, it's a challenge. False positive means I found something which doesn't apply to your company. So basically, I found a cavity, but I thought it was a cavity. In reality, it was just a piece of broccoli in your teeth, to keep my analogy up. So, and this is a real problem. I mean, obviously, you don't want to go up to a customer. Well, at least I, as CTO of CyberSift and Go, would probably agree with me. I don't want to go to a customer and tell them you have 5 critical issues. Then you actually go and check, and the customer puts in the effort to check, and they're like, "No, we don't." It's a big waste of everyone's time. So number one is actually finding these partners. I think good ones are in rare supply, especially locally. So I think that's challenge number one. Challenge number two is like what you said. Once I get these vulnerabilities that people found, how do I solve them? If you have an IT team, it's one thing. They should know what they're doing, and it's quite straightforward. But let's say you're not technology oriented. The challenge is identifying who you have to go to fix these vulnerabilities. It might be a local provider. It might be that developer that you hired as a freelancer a couple of years ago, maybe now. Or it might be a big, nameless, faceless corporation, and you have to engage with support with them. So having and this is not a technical issue, but having those points of contact for your various services, I think, is um, something that you need to have before you go in for a pen test. Let's give um, some real world examples. So, at the risk of maybe sounding a bit cliche, let's look at the recent Times of Malta. Here I'm not talking about specifically a pen test, but it is a challenge. They were protected by Cloudflare. We saw they still fell down to this denial of service. Um, and one of the challenges I'm sure that they had at that point in time, in the middle of all that confusion, poor IT admins, is listen, who from Cloudflare do I have to talk to help me out? Who from my management do I have to, or PR, whatever it is, marketing, do I have to talk to so that people know that their data is safe, that they're not being, that is just my site that is going down. So yeah, I have a lot of these challenges with in Times of Malta. I'm speculating here. I don't know if a pen test would have helped them in that particular attack or not. It's a different kind of attack. But that is yet another challenge. You might have a clean bill of health from a penetration perspective wise, but something either slips through the cracks or it's not covered by the pen test. So there's another challenge. Did you give the right scope, the right targets to your penetration test? Or is there something that you maybe forgot? It was there 5 years ago and everyone forgot about it. So these are all challenges that have a real world impact.
Agreeing with David completely here. So um, penetration testing, the bulk of it is science, but there's also part of it which is an art form. So not all penetration testers are created equal, as David was saying. It's crucial to find that ideal partner, and there might be different ones who would have expertise in different areas with different technologies. So it's good to have a list of contacts who to refer to when you really need them, depending on what kind of testing you're doing. As with regards to legislation and how one should basically be in line with that, obviously, unfortunately, not knowing the law is no excuse. So one would need to really know what is expected to be compliant. And even though the primary business of a particular company might not be technology itself, technology underpins virtually everything these days. Um, Again, using another example, like David used his dentist one. Even though I'm not, my company doesn't do car racing, if I have a fleet of vans, I still need to regularly check them, service them. I don't need to be an expert in how cars work, but obviously I know that is required of me. It is required for my business to operate. So it's important to have regular checkups of my fleet. Similarly, that would apply also to any technology that is in use. I mentioned a few examples before. So even if I just superficially use email to contact clients, if my email goes down, I mean, that will hit my business and I cannot operate normally. So even just a simple thing like email can have a negative impact if it doesn't work the way I expect it to. Obviously, one would need to go into more detail depending on the other technologies the particular business might be using.
So yeah, what we're saying is that businesses who do not take action are actually waiting for an accident to happen, which could be very, very risky. We've said this in other episodes, for the entire business operation. And yeah, I'd like to discuss further, because when we talk about pen testing, it's like we're saying, okay, there's a pen test which one does, and one size fits all. But from what I read about, and also from various discussions I've had with my colleagues at CyberSift, I know that there are different levels and different types of pen tests that one could do. How can we help our clients with these different types of pen tests, David?
Yeah, you're very, very right. and you're touching on exactly what Hubert said, where there are different levels of expertise. So if you look at from a technical standpoint at what happens when you have a pen test, um, we already mentioned one of the challenges is what are your targets, okay? You cannot, or it would be very difficult if you just ask a penetration tester, oh, you know what, my domain is go.com.mt, have fun. It it will help you for sure because you'll see it from an attacker's point of view. But how would a penetration tester know that cybersift.com is maybe also under the scope, because the names don't match up, So first of all, there are the targets that you need to define. Then things really get interesting because once you have those targets, you go into what is called reconnaissance. You're going to start hearing a lot of terms that are shared with the military here. So reconnaissance is when those, Navy SEALs go in and they start scoping out targets. Oh, I can hit that. I can hit that. I cannot hit this. And once you have this list of targets, or what your attack surface is, you need to decide what you're going to do. Now, those targets can be physical, they can be your office, right? So someone, and this really happens, someone posing as a delivery man goes in and plugs in one of those little tiny devices that just stays there listening for things. Um, I personally can very well say that I am not suited for those physical pen tests. I'm shy. I don't particularly, I'm very good at projecting the authority. But there are some of my colleagues which are. So over there again, we're already seeing different bits of expertise, maybe not technical, social, um, but you're already splitting them up. And then you go into the technical bits and bobs of it. Is my target just an infrastructure, your router, your firewall, your wireless, it's an infrastructure bit. That's one set of skills. Or is it something a bit higher up the tech stack, like a website? Do I have to look at the code of the website to figure out if there's any vulnerabilities? Do I have access to the code? And that's a whole different level of skills. Normally, with an appropriate price tag to that as well. The more skills it takes to pull off a certain area of pen test, normally the more expensive it is. So that's a challenge as well. How far do you want to take this pen test? So from a high level point of view, you're looking at that, scoping, reconnaissance, you find the vulnerabilities. Some pen tests, most pen tests stop there. This is a vulnerability, it's a risk. What are you going to do about it? And most of the time, you just need to solve it. But there are some penetration tests. They are referred to in DORA, which Hubert rightly mentioned, have a slightly different spin. They are called red teaming. And the red team is an attack team where they don't, where penetration testing is carpet bombing, boom, and you try to find everything and all the risks that a company can face. A red team has a single goal in mind. They're like, get the passwords for my CEO, and they will use any technique to actually exploit and get those passwords. So they follow one path rather than, or they follow one goal rather than the penetration test, which is more like a carpet bombing, so that you close as many gaps as possible. So yes, there are these different kinds, and depending on which regulation, which tech stack you have, you need to figure out best bang for your buck, really. I don't know if Hubert has anything else that he'd like to add.
Right. So obviously, attackers will not follow any kind of script, so they will live off the land, as we say, and anything that is made available to them, starting from obviously the lower hanging fruit, they will abuse. So it doesn't matter if it's doing something in person, if it's, making a phone call, hacking your website, it doesn't matter. I mean, they have a particular goal, illicitly making money, basically, most of the time. So, and they have unlimited time to do that. So they will try every trick in the book, like you mentioned, Dave, to basically reach that goal. And if you're testing for these things, as you mentioned, and as I mentioned before, that's why I mentioned pen testing is also an art form. Different pen testers have different skill sets, which make them perfect for different kind of pen tests. So it's not one size fits all. As you said, it's very easy for anyone to run automated scripts. That's not what we're trying to achieve here. The company shouldn't need to pay anyone to do something which they could do in the first place. So it's obviously the expertise of the pen tester and the skill set to make heads and tails of that information that is gathered during reconnaissance, and then seeing how that can be exploited to reach their goal, basically.
So Hubert does a lot of policing within Go. In the beginning, we never understood what his job is all about until we had a bit of an issue, and he did save the day for us. And I am sure he can give us a couple of examples which he has experienced and showcase the positive impact of penetration testing using such examples before we move on to a real life demo, actually.
Well, issues specifically at Go, I mean, there's the usual phishing email attacks which happen all the time, and obviously every company experiences that. So one would need to, have that channel being monitored and checking what people are receiving. Let's remember that our email addresses is like an open mailbox out in the street. Anybody can dump anything in it. So it's good that one checks for at least at the very minimum, the most common types of attacks. David mentioned also issues with other companies. These happen all the time, and it's more worrying about the ones we don't hear about more than the ones that we do hear about, actually, because either it wasn't reported properly or I mean, obviously certain companies might consider being the victim of an attack as a reputation, more of a reputational risk, so they wouldn't want to disclose the information related to that. But obviously at Go, we consider cybersecurity to be very, very important. So we are a technology company primarily, and we have many, many systems and networks which underlie all that we do, basically.
And in truth, we are actually protecting ourselves and our customers, so to speak, when we are so strict about cybersecurity.
That's exactly it. So as we mentioned before, if you're using a van to do deliveries, the van needs to be in top shape for the driver's safety, for the people for the safety for the people in the street, and for the efficiency of your business too. So that's exactly what cybersecurity does. So if you're using technology, it's assessing that everything basically is working the way you intended to work without unforeseen consequences. As I was saying, at Go, we make sure, we try to make sure that this is the case every day. So information security is very high on the company's agenda, and it's the driving force, obviously, for my team. So it's extremely, extremely important that it's not just a matter of implementing a system and forgetting about it. It needs constant attention. As David said, technologies change, the way you might be using the system changes. So you need to, take stock of what is happening and that everything continues to operate the way you want it to.
So David, for the live demo, how can we show how it can be done by a relatively unskilled attacker and little to no cost?
Okay, So yes, I'm sharing my screen, and we are going to do a very quick, not a very deep exercise on at least the beginning stages of a pen test. Okay. Now, there is a misconception that when you start a pen test, a lot of um, noise is going to be generated. You know, the attacker is knocking at all your doors, um, rattling all the windows, so to speak. The reality is far from it. Most of the time, when you are doing an initial reconnaissance, you don't send a single packet, you don't send a single, there's no peep from you, there's no indication that you are actually attacking. So, for example, one of the tools that we use regularly, that isn't CyberSift, of course, is this Shodan. And to give everyone an idea of what this is, um, let's pick on us, on ourselves, on cybersift.io, right? And by running, so all I know is that I have cybersift.io as one of my targets. And as you can see over here, uh, as part of kind of without even doing anything, Shodan is already giving me a pretty good idea of what I'm up against, right? So it's giving me a humongous list of targets over here. It's telling me, listen, I'm Google verified, so I might be using Google as my collaboration tool, right? Microsoft Office 365 is there as well. And oh, look, there's Cloudflare, the famous Cloudflare. Everyone is used to Cloudflare by now. And they're like, so we have there's a bunch of different, targets. David.blog is there, and like without firing a single shot, so to speak, I'm already getting a pretty good idea of what I'm up against. And then things over here start getting interesting again. So you're like, okay, what is this drive, And Shodan is going to tell you, listen, this drive resides on a particular IP, and there's port 22 open. And do you know that on port 22 there is OpenSSH running? And do you know that this particular server has these vulnerabilities working over there, So or already as a hacker, like straight out of the bat, I haven't done anything, I haven't spent any money, this is free. And I'm getting a good idea of the tools, so the targets, first of all, the targets that I might attack, the vulnerabilities that I have to focus on, and possibly even the exploits that I need to get into the infrastructure. Super cheap,
If I may
free,
jump in, David, sorry to interrupt.
of course.
So basically, this is public information for any system out there which is reachable over the internet. Um, it's calculated that as soon as a new system is made available online, within 3 minutes of it becoming active, there would already be a system like Shodan and others that would be polling your system and identifying what technologies you're using. So within 3 minutes of it becoming active. So you cannot hide basically as soon as a system is available out there, which obviously you make available for your customers, for example. It automatically starts being scanned and assessed by these platforms, basically.
Exactly. Yep. So it's very easy to quickly get stuck. And to give just now here shameless self plug, this doesn't obviously stop at your perimeter, so the ports and the IPs that I have listening, but it should also extend into your network, into your perimeter. So, for example, with our tool Tutela, this one, yes, we wrote, we have the possibility of checking not just vulnerabilities that are present in your infrastructure, very important, but only step one. Step two is what are the vulnerabilities that I have in my applications. So my web server might have a vulnerability, fine, and I patch it. But what about the code running on your web server? What vulnerabilities are there over there? So these kind of penetration tests, again, ties back to what we were saying before, can go as deep and as far as you want them to. There are different risk factors. Is it a penetration test that has to do with just infrastructure, so a network scan? Is it a penetration test that maybe has something to do with the operating system, Windows, So here it's showing me that some of my laptop, which is a Dell laptop, actually has vulnerabilities in some of its support software, or Cisco WebEx, you know. And this gives administrators and businesses a very good idea of the threats that are pertinent to their infrastructure, which is why we often hear the term uh, threat-led penetration testing. You need to know what the threats out there that apply to you. Otherwise, you're just facing a whole, like Hubert said, a whole vast plethora of threats which maybe don't apply to you, and attackers will find them quicker than you can defend against them. And with that, this really brief demo is over, so I'm going to stop sharing my screen.
So, Hubert, what technical aspects that we have discussed, in your opinion, can be translated into actionable insights for business leaders?
So it's important to select and scope penetration testing initiatives regularly. And as David mentioned, you should have a clear end game in mind. So otherwise it would be too vast to tackle. Obviously, security is about continuous improvement. So focusing your pen test on critical systems and addressing any potential issues that are found will always be improving your posture. So determine your goals for testing and whether you're assessing specific vulnerabilities or else covering compliance requirements, for example, depending on the business. Obviously, you might be regulated by one law or another. Then when you define the scope, you outline how you'll be conducting the testing, including, as David mentioned, which targets will be in scope, what testing methods will be used, and if there are any limitations. Obviously, a system which is continuously in use it can be tested in a particular way and not in another. So you need to have that in mind. Other factors, obviously, businesses need to consider are budgets to conduct these kind of tests. Although, as we're seeing, there should be dedicated budgets to these things because they're basically part and parcel of doing business these days. If there are any time constraints or, as I mentioned, any regulatory requirements that need to be covered. Proper scoping also ensures that the testing aligns with your security goals as a company. And it's effective for identifying potential risks. And then out of those, then you would have a plan on how to go ahead with enhancing your business's defenses, basically.
Thank you, Hubert. So, David, pen tests versus DORA red teaming.
So we touched on that already, that they are basically a bit, they are related, definitely. They both have the same goal at the end of the day, to make sure that your security hygiene is up to scratch, but they go about it differently. So initially, probably as a kind of practical advice I can give, it's better to start with your more traditional, let's call it traditional, penetration test, because its job is to point out as many holes as it can. So you're going up, and most of the time, these kind of penetration testing will get the low-hanging fruit, as you just saw. So they're the things that are ripe for exploitation. So I would start from there, but then DORA mandates, and it's good that you perform this red team. Now, this red teaming is going to test the hypothesis that, listen, you have your defenses in place, you have your monitoring in place, you've scoped it exactly like Hubert said. Now let's see if we managed to trip anything. The goal being CEO's password or financials for the company. And as Hubert said, they will use any and all means necessary, including social engineering, whatever it is. There's a kind of a no holds bar. The scope is not so limited. But hopefully, because you've done the penetration testing, the red teaming will at least trip up 1 or 2 flags along the way and you would detect them. Then it's up to you whether to say continue the exercise till the end, or we caught you, that's it. The whole scope of the red team is to test the blue team, which is your defenses. And penetration tester is actually part of your blue team when you really think about it. They're not there to break in, they're actually there to test the locks for you.
Thank you, David. So companies really cannot not conduct penetration testing. There are different types of tests. It's important to scope such tests. It's important to have a very reliable third-party company to do the tests for you, to make sure that business continuity remains a priority for your business. So as we come towards the end of this webinar, episode 3, we would like to thank Hubert for his participation and look forward to next webinar, which will include the training, the importance of training. We will be discussing how important it is to actually train our employees and for them to learn how to appreciate cybersecurity more, to be aware of the importance of cybersecurity and the results of a penetration test. Thank you.
Thank you very much.